the jungle is quiet, a little too quiet. For a young American GI in Vietnam, his heart is hammering against his ribs. His hands are slick with sweat on the plastic stock of his rifle. This is the M16, a futuristic weapon, way lighter than the old M14 and capable of spitting out a storm of bullets. It's supposed to be the future of warfare. Then, a single twig snaps. The air shatters with the deafening roar of an AK-47. The world just explodes. He brings his rifle up, squeezes the trigger, and click. Nothing. He yanks the charging handle, aims again. Click. The revolutionary weapon in his hands is completely silent. In the single most critical moment of his life, America's cutting-edge technology has turned into a useless piece of plastic and metal, and this wasn't an isolated incident. This was the tragic story of the M16's disastrous debut. A story of soldiers found dead next to their disassembled rifles, desperately trying to fix the very weapon that was supposed to protect them. It was a rifle, some nicknamed the Mattel toy, a symbol of failure that was getting Americans killed. So how did this happen? How did the most advanced military on the planet send its soldiers into battle with a rifle that didn't work? And how did that same failed weapon manage to become one of the most successful and legendary firearms in history? This is the story of the M16, from its catastrophic failure to its ultimate redemption. Section 1. A deadly cocktail. The M16's early failure wasn't because of one single flaw, but a perfect storm of terrible decisions. The first, and maybe the most critical, was a change in the rifle's ammunition. Eugene Stoner, the M16's brilliant designer, built it to use a very specific ammo loaded with DuPont IMR 4475 powder. This powder burned relatively cleanly, which was essential for the rifle's direct impingement gas system. But when the army took over, they made a fateful switch. Citing costs, they ordered the ammo to be loaded with the Olin Mathieson WC-846 ball powder. This was like putting cheap, dirty fuel into a Formula One race car. The ball powder burned much dirtier, leaving behind the thick carbon gunk that quickly fouled the rifle's moving parts. Even worse, the new powder had a different pressure curve, which dramatically increased the rifle's cyclic rate of fire. This violent, sped-up action put immense stress on the internal components. The extractor would try to rip the spent cartridge from the chamber before the gas pressure had dropped enough, often tearing the rim right off the casing. This left the rest of the cartridge hopelessly stuck in the chamber. This jam, a failure to extract, was one of the M16's deadliest malfunctions. You couldn't just pull the charging handle to fix it. A soldier had to stop everything, find a cleaning rod, and punch the stuck casing out from the barrel, a death sentence in a firefight. Section 2. The missing chrome. That ammunition disaster was made exponentially worse by another cost-cutting decision. Stoner's original design called for the chamber and the barrel to be lined with chrome. Chrome plating was a known and proven practice for military rifles, creating a hard, slick surface that resists rust and helps spent cartridges slide out smoothly. It was a known must-have for weapons being used in humid jungle environments. Yet, in a decision that a later congressional investigation would call baffling, the Army decided to skip the chrome lining on the first production M16S. They argued it was an unnecessary expense. In the brutal humidity of Vietnam, this turned out to be a fatal mistake. Without that protective layer of chrome, the steel chambers could corrode and pit. This rough, corroded surface, combined with a filthy residue from the ball powder, basically acted like glue on the brass cartridges. It created the exact same failure to extract malfunction, creating a cycle of constant, life-threatening jams. Section 3. The lie of self-cleaning. To make matters even worse, a third almost unbelievable mistake was made, this one in training and doctrine. In its marketing, Colt had talked up the M16's advanced design, suggesting it didn't need much maintenance. This was somehow misinterpreted by some in the chain of command to mean the rifle was basically self-cleaning. Because of this, the first troops who got the M16 in Vietnam were issued the rifles with no cleaning kits and no real instructions on how to maintain them. Think about that. Soldiers were sent into the jungle with a weapon uniquely prone to fouling and corrosion, and were essentially told it didn't need to be cleaned. It was a complete recipe for disaster. When the reports of jam started flooding in, the initial response was just to blame the soldiers for not cleaning their rifles, even though they hadn't been given the tools or the training to do it. Section 4. The Holes of Power. The M16's problems didn't start in the jungles of Vietnam. They started in the bureaucratic battlefields of Washington, D.C. The rifle's development was tangled up in politics and inter-service rivalry. Many senior army officers were deeply invested in their own rifle, the heavy, powerful M14. They saw Stoner's AR-15 as this strange, unproven toy. It was lightweight, made of aluminum and plastic, and fired a small .22 caliber bullet. All of that flew in the face of the Army's long-held traditions of marksmanship with big, large-caliber rifles. This resistance led to a rushed and messy adoption process, pushed through by Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, who wanted a single, modern rifle for all branches of the military. The M16 was forced on a reluctant Army. Critics and later investigations would argue that the Army then made its disastrous changes to the ammunition and the design without fully understanding the consequences, with some tests being skewed to favor the M14. The rifle was essentially sent to war before its development was really finished, a victim of politics that put careers ahead of soldiers' lives. Section 5. The Redemption of the M16A1. As soldiers' letters home filled with horror stories and congressmen heard about troops being found dead with their jammed rifles, the scandal blew up. In 1967, a congressional subcommittee launched an investigation. Their final report was scathing, exposing the entire chain of failure, from the bad ammo to the missing cleaning kits. The public outcry finally forced the Department of Defense to act. The result was a series of critical upgrades that would turn the flawed M16 into the reliable M16A1. The fixes directly addressed the core problems. First, the chamber and barrel were finally chrome-plated, which drastically reduced corrosion and made extraction much smoother. Second, while the Army didn't switch back to the original powder, the ball powder was reformulated to burn cleaner. A new buffer was also installed in the stock to slow the cyclic rate back down to a manageable level, reducing stress on the parts. Third, cleaning kits were finally shipped out by the thousands, along with new training programs that hammered home the need for constant maintenance. 1968 training film put it bluntly. The M16 is a machine. Like any machine, it can break down if it is not cared for. And finally, a forward assist was added to the side of the rifle, a plunger that let a soldier manually force the bolt closed. Eugene Stoner himself reportedly hated the addition, but it gave a huge psychological boost to the troops, giving them a way to feel in control of their weapon. With these changes, the rate of malfunctions plummeted. By the late 1960s, the M16A1 was a standard rifle, and its reputation began the slow climb from total failure to trusted sidearm. The story of the M16 is a powerful lesson in how the realities of the battlefield can expose fatal flaws made in boardrooms and labs. It's a story of failure, sure, but it's also one of incredible adaptation and redemption. If you enjoyed this deep dive into military history, take a moment to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. And for any veterans or firearms experts watching, what's your experience with the M16 platform? We'd love to hear your stories and insights, so drop them in the comments below. The redemption of the M16A1 was really just the beginning of the story. After its trial by fire in Vietnam, the M16 family of rifles became the backbone of the U.S. military for more than 50 years. In the 1980s, the M16A2 incorporated lessons from the field with a heavier barrel and better sights. That was followed by the M16A4, which served well into the 21st century. But the rifle's ultimate legacy is probably its most famous descendant, the M4 carbine. The M4 is basically a shorter, more compact M16, and it became the standard weapon for a new generation of soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan, proving the lasting genius of Eugene Stoner's original design. The M16's influence spread across the globe. It's now one of the most recognizable and widely produced rifles in the world, and its 5.56mm cartridge became a NATO standard, reshaping small arms design for decades to come. The M16 is so much more than just a rifle. It's a symbol of both catastrophic failure and incredible innovation. Its early troubles cost lives and shook the confidence of a generation of soldiers. But the platform's ability to overcome those failures through painful, hard-won lessons is exactly why it became a legend. It wasn't born a perfect weapon. It was forged into one in the crucible of combat.